These 4 points will determine how good your mix is. If you're new to the mixing game, you'll know that it's very difficult to get a good mix. You'll always look at the end of the project and think to yourself, what on earth did I do wrong? How could I improve what it is that I'm doing? It might sound good in the headphones and you go play it in the car, it sounds trash, right? So I'm going to give you 4 ways that you can have a look at and monitor to ensure that you are slowly but surely improving the way that you mix. First way is your equipment. Equipment is massive in that you don't want to be told lies. This is just how I always thought about it when I had bad equipment, is that the equipment was telling me the wrong thing. And it's not me blaming the equipment, but it's like, look, I can only work on what I can hear. And my ears aren't that developed, but I need something decent. So in the beginning, I worked with Logitech speakers, which if you know, you'll know that they're weird in the high end. They have a little bit of a high end, but it feels false. The sub is not great, but I mean, great, it's got a sub. It's not accurate at all, but at least it's there. So at least there's something for you to work off of. But I very quickly had to move over to my PreSonus E5s. My E5s were a lot better in that it was a little bit more accurate, but it was still off by a bit. E5s are good, and I know that the new generation is a lot better, but still, it's still very entry level. I currently have HS5s. Depending on who you are, you might still see it as entry level, but I see them as speakers that I can, or monitors that I can really trust, just because I feel like the information I'm getting back from them is quite accurate. I have worked on a couple other models and I've tried to adjust to them, but unfortunately, just because I've worked with HS5s for so long, so you don't have to have the best equipment, but just try as best as you can to have something that's going to give you an accurate representation of the music you're listening to, whether it be a decent headphone or decent monitors. Second point is skill. Skill with decent equipment equals a good mix, right? You'd expect, right? So you want to ensure that as you are trying to work on upping your equipment, what it is that you're working with, that you're also working on improving your skill. This is just time under tension. This is just doing reps. So record yourself if you're an artist. Record everybody. Record the homie. Record everybody who comes through. Get different voices through your ears so that you can pick out elements and develop your skill. Actually sitting there and figuring out, okay, we've got this reverb in front of us. How do we make it sound good? Go onto YouTube, figure out how other people make their reverb sound good. How do they make them sound holy? How do they make them sound crisp? Why is someone else's reverb not bogged down and heavy sounding, whereas mine just sounds like it doesn't really add anything to the track? These are all things that you can get off of YouTube, off of Google, and off of you just practicing with different vocals. Vocal quality and vocal characteristics. If you work with different people, you get to figure out exactly how you can tweak. Even if you are the artist, you get to tweak different vocals and you get to see just how wonderful and different everybody's vocal is. You can pick up on your skills very quickly. You might be dealing with a baritone in one day, and then all of a sudden you've got this really high-pitched female singer the next day. You never know. And it really does up your skill, and it helps you increase your skill quickly. Third point is reference tracks. Reference tracks are so important. I ask for them to this day. I know some of the best mixing engineers who still ask for reference tracks. It just gives you a pathway in terms of what it is that's needed. I always talk about this communication barrier that happens between the mixing engineer and the artist. There's a language that music producers and engineers speak. It's very technical, using very technical terms, because you're the one dealing with the instrument. You're dealing with the proximal effect happening at the microphone. You're dealing with the wetness of the reverb. Those things don't mean anything to an artist. An artist will tell you that they'll ask you, why do I sound so boxed in? Why do I sound like I'm in a massive hall? Now, there's this gap between the technical side and the more artistic, creative, using adjectives to describe what it is that you want. And being able to move between the two with your language makes it very easy for you to then interpret what's happening in a reference. So a person might say, in the reference, at 2 minutes there's this thing that happens. You can then convey what it is that's happening there and say, do you want it to happen like this? Do you want it to happen like that? As the technical person, at the same time, the artist doesn't have to bash their head against the wall trying to explain what it is that they want to. They just go to a song and look, Nicki Minaj did it over there in minute 3. And then the producer will go, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's just a stutter effect. I can do that, right? But being able to, balance between the two and speak that language, and at least being able to transfer or convey what it is that you want, makes the mixing process that much quicker and that much easier. The fourth point, and probably the most important point, is having benchmarks. Now, this is something that I only learned later on, but once I eventually did get to making a good mix, there was no way for me to go back and do that again unless it was for that particular song. What I did realize is that there's certain things that you can benchmark, like volume, right? So I have an LUFS that I work towards every single time I'm working on a track, because the few tracks that I have worked on had that same LUFS, and it just seemed that those were the perfect volume. Look, different artists want different things at different volumes, but there's a certain norm and there's a certain expectation across the industry. And if you can work towards that, at least towards with regards to technical aspects, then everything else, you can work on in your revisions. That whole revision process is basically for preferences. And what I did is I ensured that every single time I was working on a track, everything would basically be sitting anywhere between -10 and -8 LUFS. If they wanted it louder, I would push it to a point, and I'd say, look, beyond this point, what we're going to get is random distortion. This is not going to sound great. Any softer than that doesn't really matter. I don't mind, because I know once it gets uploaded, all of the different platforms will sort you out anyway. But having those benchmarks and knowing what needs to happen, it's the same with waveform. When you look at your waveforms, if I look at a waveform, I can already tell if something is being cut off, if something is being shaved off, if something is distorting, just by the way the waveform is being created, right? So there I've got my benchmark that I know what something should look like. I can look at a track and say, yeah, this track has probably been mastered. Oh no, this track could probably go in for a little bit more without even listening to it, right? So creating these benchmarks in your mind and seeing things over and over and over and over again through practice, repetition, skills, and obviously having decent equipment to listen back to all of this stuff on is what's going to help to improve your skill and ultimately get you a better mix. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you need any extra resources, just have a look in my description. You'll find my ebooks, you'll find my blog, my WhatsApp channel, as well as the other social medias that you can follow me on. Peace.